Yes. It is my special duty this morning to welcome our speaker today, Dr. Karmen Smith. Dr. Karmen Smith worked as a child and family intervention specialist for Clark County Family Services for over 20 years. She did that as her way of helping families. She helps survivors realize that abuse, addiction, and emotional trauma does not have to be their legacy. Karen teaches that our trauma is our biggest treasure. She is a licensed clinical social worker who destigmatizes mental health symptoms by educating people about depression and anxiety. Her intention is to create a safe place to heal our biases and entrenched views that contribute to polarized thinking that leads to separation. In 2018, marking 1 year after the Charlottesville protest that shocked the nation, Dr. Smith was the keynote speaker at the Eastern Unity Conference in Charlottesville, Virginia. Dr. Smith, along with Marianne Williamson, addressed race, spirituality, and healing. Karmen is the author of the book, The I Am Solution: Simple Practices to Transform Fear Back to Love. It helps people realize that they have the power to heal. Dr. Smith was the associate pastor at the University of Metaphysics Institute for many years, where she served her mentor, Dr. Paul Leon Masters. She was also the co-pastor of Divine Light Ministries with Nancy Abercrombie in 2005. Dr. Smith is a guest lecturer right now at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, teaching helping professionals how to activate their healing power. She has taught all over the world that this is our time to activate our power and to embody the teachings of past sages and shamans. All the power that we need is within ourselves. This is our time to shine, our time to put everything into practice. It is our time to be the one. And after our next song, the next voice you will hear will be Dr. Karmen Smith. There's not a song? All right. There is not a song. You are privileged to hear Dr. Karmen Smith.
Singing, is this on? I'm not singing, okay? So I'm not the next song. But let me just tell you, it's just a blessing to be here. I have so many people in the audience that love me because I've been coming to this church, and if I don't know you and I haven't met you, it means I've been loving you from afar, from a little bit of a distance, like the back row. And so I'm really blessed to be here. And I'd like to talk to you today about the power within, because that's my topic, the power within, creating a world from the inside out. So I am a trauma specialist, but I'm also a spiritual teacher. So my specialty is trauma and spirituality. And I have to tell you, I was visiting a friend about a couple of months ago, and he said, I want you to tell the story, Karmen. Tell it to my friend. And I said, are you talking about the story that happened so long ago? And he said, yeah, I think that'll help her. And I said, well, I don't even remember the story because that was an old me. But I understand that you want me to tell you this story because you think it might help. So here it goes. So I started out and I had to think about, okay, what happened 20 some odd years ago and my journey and how can it help this person? So I started out this way. I said, well, I had a 2-month-old child. I had my husband. We were going through a really rough patch. We were thinking about getting a divorce. So we go to this couples counseling session. And this was our first time going, and we were in this room with 10 couples. And so those 10 couples were there with a counselor, and the counselor said, we're going to go around the room, and we're going to talk about what great thing happened over the weekend. And it got to my husband's turn, and he said, I don't have a problem. My only problem is that I'm married, and so if I get a divorce, I don't have a problem anymore. So he got up and left. Meanwhile, I was there with my 2-month-old, and I was looking at all of these strangers, and they're looking at me, and the counselor really didn't know what to say. So I waited a few seconds, which seemed like eternity. I got my baby in the cart, the stroller, and there were these long stairs. They were very steep, and I had to pick up the whole thing. You know, moms, you've done this before probably. And I had to maneuver downstairs with a stroller and a 2-month-old. And then after I found my way home, I realized that the debit and credit cards that I'd been using to get food were all cut off. A few days later, the police came to my house, and they said, you have 5 minutes to vacate. We have a termination order or a restraining order. You can't be within 500 feet. I said, this is my house. They said, it just says you have to leave. So I took my 2-month-old, and luckily, I had a car. And instead of living in my car, I went to a homeless shelter and lived there for 4 months. Let me tell you something. That was 26 years ago, and I'd like to show you the stairs. These are the stairs that I maneuvered down. And those of you who belong to this church, you know that those stairs are right outside. 26 years ago, I maneuvered my 2-month-old, who's now a 26-year-old man, down a flight of stairs. And let me tell you, there were tears in my eyes when I was coming down those stairs because I was scared to death. I was a single mom, and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And I felt like everything was coming at me. I felt like a target. And I can't even tell you if you've ever had that type of fear, that type of trauma, where you don't know where your next meal is coming from, and you don't know if you're going to have a roof over your head, and you have another mouth to feed. So that is a real scary place to be, but I want you to know that I am standing in the sanctuary, full of strength and courage, knowing that there's a power within me. But 26 years ago, I didn't know that then. There's a lot that has happened in those 26 years, and I'd like to give you some information on how to change your life around. Because as I was telling that story to the friend that wanted me to tell that story, there are 2 parts. You just heard the first part, and it sounds like I'm a victim, doesn't it? Well, let me tell you, as long as you feel like a victim, you're going to be a victim. So I had to change that mindset around. And this is how I did it, because thoughts are powerful, people. And so when I was coming down those stairs, I felt like life and things were happening to me. And if you want to be healed, if you want to have power within yourself, you have to flip that script. Because things are happening for you. Now, I didn't know that at the time. Nobody could have told me that at the time. But this is something that I learned over time, and it changed my life. So, first of all, you have to realize that when you have that stinking thinking, you look like a target. Because when you think of yourself as a victim, like this is happening to me, why did he do that to me? Why is the world happening like this to me? Why did my family do that to me? You have a target on you, and you're going to continue to have victim experiences. Now, I was a therapist for many years, and for many years I thought that I was healing other people. I wasn't healing anybody. What I was doing was healing myself, because I needed to realize that until I started doing some type of action, I was going to continue to be a victim. And when you're a victim, you can't help other people. Let me just say that again. As long as you think of yourself as a victim, you can't help anybody else. The world and the universe is waiting for you to help yourself. And so as long as I had those victim types of things, I wasn't changing. What I was doing was blaming. What I was doing was holding on to hatred. What I was doing was hurting other people, because hurting people hurt people. So even though I was a social worker, even though I was in this wonderful position, I wasn't helping anybody, because I thought of myself as a victim. So in order to help people, guess what I had to do? I had to do something like that. I had to change. Now, change is good as long as I don't have to do anything different, right? I had to change. And so the universe kept giving me these experiences of victimization until I decided, wait a minute, do I need to change? Why can't that other person change? My boss needs to change. My ex-husband, oh my gosh, he needs to change. There are so many people, my coworker, ooh, she needs to change. But I never thought of me changing. What would that mean? Do you know what that meant? It meant that the first male figure I had in my life was an alcoholic, was not a good father, in my opinion. And so I needed to go back and forgive him. What does that have to do with my ex-husband? A lot. What does that have to do with me raising my son? Everything. So going back to the root of my anger, of my resentment, of my victimization was the root of me changing. And Lord knows I didn't want to do that. So what did I have to do? Oh, the F word. Now, this is a wonderful definition of forgiveness. And for many years, I thought that forgiveness was something else. But this is a really good definition. And psychologists generally define forgiveness as a conscious, meaning you mean to do it, deliberate, I'm gonna do it, decision to release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward a person or a group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they actually deserve your forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor is it condoning another person's behavior or excusing the offense. But mostly, what forgiveness does is it takes your power back. Because you're no longer giving somebody the power and the reins over your life and over your emotions and over your feelings. You're taking back your power. Let me just say that God doesn't forgive because God doesn't need to. And you need to reflect God. You need to be that light in every moment. So when you don't forgive something, even if it happened 40 years ago, you're walking around like a victim. And that's not where your power is. It took me a long time to understand that. But there's a powerful clip that I'd like for you to see, because when I think of forgiveness, I think of like the worst atrocity you can think of. worse than mine of being homeless and hungry. But think of the worst thing, and could you forgive it? And what would that look like? This is what it looks like for me.
I caught up with these three incredible women at the Second Presbyterian Church, 1 block from the crime scene.
I feel like I'm around strength. I don't know about you, but that's what it feels like. Do you feel strong?
Some days you can conquer the world, and other days you just want to hurry up, go away.
Today, their voices are being heard, preaching about the power and purpose of forgiveness.
I don't know if you guys know this, but I don't consider you victims. I consider you teachers. 3 people who could teach us something. We watched you go through pain. We watched you on your knees. We watched you hug your community. And then we watched something that I feel like is a miracle.
We have to forgive.
Just 2 days after losing their loved ones, family members said they forgave the shooter.
And I forgive you.
But may God have mercy on you.
How hard were those words?
It wasn't hard at all. I had some other things to say to go with it, but someone behind me started crying. What people don't know is that there was a silence in that room. It felt so serene in that room. There was a calmness in that room. Me and Miss Polly watched my son take his last breath. But for me to be kneeling right over him and looking at how beautiful he was, and he seemed like he was at peace.
Polly describes a light in the room that seemed almost spiritual.
And there was a light in that room. It's almost like the lights was off, but they weren't. Remember?
Yes.
It was like we were in a twilight. There was 2 different lights in that room. He had a laser on that gun. That was one of the lights. But the other light was, it was a quiet. It was like you were in a different world.
She says she felt God's presence.
I have no doubt that he was in that room with us.
With all that loss, you still know he was in the room
I
with
know
you.
God was in that room, yeah.
I know that we're all people, and you feel the same pain, and you feel the same hope. So, Polly, for you, the idea, I would think that you'd be livid, angry, want revenge, want to just take the guy by the throat, you know?
I was that way at first. But then I thought about Felicia. Felicia had lost her son. And I said, she could forgive. Why are you so hard-hearted? You can't forgive. So from that day on, I had a release. Because forgiveness is like, you think you're letting somebody else off the hook, but you're actually letting yourself off the hook. Because if you keep it, there's no healing with hatred. You have to love each other. That's our 2nd commandment.
You have to love each other. There are so many things that struck me about those powerful women. One is the reporter said, I feel strength. I feel like I'm around strength. This is a vibrational energy that is palpable. You can feel it. So when someone has transformed or transcended hatred, transcended victimization, you can feel it because you're not around an ordinary human being, because they've changed. They've taken the initiative to change, and you can feel it. Your family can feel it. It vibrates out. Your community can feel it. And so I want you to understand that this power is inside of you, waiting to be awakened. There's another thing that struck me about those powerful women, and that is the light that was in the room. She said there were 2 lights. I don't know if you've seen this story before, but this is the story behind the story that you may have to dig for, because the news will tell you about the 9 people that lost their lives. But what the news may not tell you unless you dig is that there was something in that room. Let me tell you what I know was in that room. There were some people that did the work, that were unconditional lovers in that room. They had transcended ordinary human behavior, and they unconditionally loved people, and they had a practice of forgiving people. This wasn't their first rodeo. These were powerful women, and then that happened. And the light that was in that room were those women and those people that passed away. She even said that her son had a peace about him. And when there's love, there's peace. Do you understand those are the attributes of God that we talk about? That they embodied that. That light wasn't necessarily coming from outside of them. It was coming from inside of them. And it transmuted and transformed that room into another world, into another dimension, filled with love and compassion. Do you know that you have that also? But you don't want to change? You don't want to look at somebody different or look at yourself different and forgive yourself. We need to be forgiveness warriors. We need to transform ourselves from being victims into being what we're afraid of being. God. Now, how did that sit with you? Did it sit like, well, yes, of course, Karmen? Or was it like, well, wait a minute now. I wasn't taught that God is inside of me. I was taught that it's outside of me. Do you know that this is the time for God to be inside of you? Hello? Do you know that this is the time for God to be inside of you and not outside of you? Can you think of a better time? Here's another thing I had to do. I had to forgive, and I had to stop telling the victim story. Remember when I told my friend, I said, well, I don't even remember the story now. It's been so long, because I don't tell it. There are people that I've known for years. They don't know that I had a 2-month-old and was homeless. And the reason is because I don't tell the victim story. What they see is a very successful, wealthy woman. Thank you. Abundance. It works. So I don't need to tell the victim story. Do you know why people tell the victim story? It's because they think that their love is going to come from outside of them. So they use sympathy. Oh, woe is me, this and that. And then the other person says, oh, really? Wow, that's horrible. And they think that's love. That's not even close to love. It's a courtesy that people give you, but there's a stronger love that comes from triumph in knowing who you are, not the circumstance. The circumstance is not powerful. Who you are is more powerful. Speak from that and stop telling the victim story, because you don't want to be a target. You don't want to be the victim and have more victim experiences. Change the story to reflect your power. Do you know that you can be powerful without making somebody else the bad guy? Let me just say that again. Did you know that you can be powerful without making somebody else the bad guy? I could be powerful, but I didn't need to badmouth my ex-husband because I have a son to raise. I'm not going to badmouth him. He's part of him. Glorious, wonderful. So I can be powerful and magnificent and stand in my glory and get my degrees. But I don't need to make somebody else the bad guy in comparison to me. I need to see my ex-husband as letting me know how powerful I am. That was his job. Everybody I meet is my shaman, is my sage, is my teacher, is my sensei. My ex-husband was showing me, Karmen, go get your master's. Karmen, go get your doctorate. Karmen, there's nothing stopping you. Because once you've been homeless and hungry, there's nothing but to go up. He was showing me I'm indestructible. Do you think he knew that? I knew that. I can be a hero, a shero. I can be all of that, and I don't have to put him down. He's just showing me. My boss is just showing me. My coworkers are showing me how to forgive. My dad is showing me how powerful I am. My father, my son, the person in traffic, whoever it is showing me and giving me opportunities to be who I am. And who are you? Well, that's everything. Because whoever you are, it vibrates out to your family. Whoever you are vibrates out to your community. I'm God in Walmart in aisle 7. I'm God at work. I'm God all in traffic, traveling, watching the news. I'm here to express God. What are you here for? Because I've got to be powerful in this moment. Because I don't know if you've noticed, but this moment has some chaos going on. I want to be vibrating out my power. I'm not a victim. That chaos isn't going to come over here. I'm going to dictate what comes in my space. Look at that. I am vibrating out. And this is a manifestation, a natural manifestation of what I'm talking about. In January 12th, in the Philippines, this volcano went off. And if you saw the video, it had thunder and lightning all in the volcano, and it was its own weather pattern. I am the thunder and I am the lightning. So when I talk about love, I'm talking about power, people. Marianne Williamson was on stage at the debates, and she talked about love coming in, and people laughed and people Googled her. But what they didn't understand was that love is powerful. It's palpable. It vibrates out of you, and it changes what's around you. That is the power of love. That is powerful. Inside of you, that energy, that love energy, that compassion, that gratitude, all of that stuff changes things. It changed my life. So I don't have the victim story. I gave the person, the friend, that first part of the story. And then I said, I don't know if I would have known myself if I hadn't gone through some stuff. I worked at the county for 10 years, and then the next 10 years, I knew myself. So for 10 years, I wasn't helping anybody. I wasn't changing me. For the next 10 years, when I started to change and started to forgive people, people would come into my office. They would feel something different. I'd work at Child Haven. The kids were all over the place. I would go over into the crib, and people would stop crying. I was like, what is happening here? It's palpable, people. It lights up a room when there's death in it, and it brings life into a room where there are corpses. You need to understand this power, because that's what you need right now. That's what we need right now. I want to close with Ernest Holmes. And I want to take the mystery out of it. It is the nature of the universe to give us what we are able to take. It cannot give us more. It has given all. We have not yet accepted the greater gift. The greater gift. the greatest gift is stepping into your power. And it changes everything. Namaste.
Wow, are you ready to step into your power?